Hello, I'm Worthington Schools Superintendent Trent Bowers, and I want to welcome you to our 2023 State of the Schools Week. Our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. That mission begins the minute a student walks into our buildings and continues through graduation and beyond. This week, we will take you on a journey through the Worthington schools where you will see some of the programs, students, and staff that make this district a special place. We will start this week taking a look at our youngest learners. Sutter Park Preschool is a welcoming environment where kids can develop at their own pace. At Sutter, half of the students have been identified with special needs, and half of their students are typically developing peers who serve as role models in the program. Shannon Daly has had 2 children attend Sutter Park. Her daughter Josie is now at Wilson Hill Elementary, and her son Jack is currently a student at Sutter. Shannon tells me that she's so thankful that her family found Sutter.
I'm so grateful to that friend. I still tell her to this day all the time. If you hadn't mentioned Sutter Park, I may not have found it in time, and it came to us at the perfect time.
Mommy?
Yes.
Are you the orange one?
You and I are both on that camera right
So you can wave to the camera if you want to.
Okay,
You want to wave
wave.
at it?
We found Sutter Park through a friend. We were in a private daycare preschool. It wasn't really the best fit for our family. Josie was struggling. We didn't know very many people in the community, but a friend of mine had a son here, and she said it had really changed things for her family. That was an understatement for us. It definitely changed things for us. We found our community. We found our second family. Josie really just thrived here, and things really turned around for her. The teachers feel like family. I mean, I feel completely confident that the kids are loved. They know kids, and I feel very safe with him here. Why don't you tell them your favorite thing about school? Is it the motor room? Yeah. And you love the playground?
Yeah.
The coolest thing about the playground is Jack can zoom around in his wheelchair, or he can get out of his wheelchair and he can climb around and he's safe. It's the little things. It's that every single person we've run into has been kind and caring and listened to us. Jack was pretty nervous about riding the bus. His current bus driver, Miss Leanne, I mean, she is the sweetest woman, and Jack loves her and talks about her all the time. I look forward to seeing her. Like, I'll be in the middle of a rough day and she's dropping him off, and she just, so cheery and sweet. Jack had surgery in November, and it was tough. It was tough for Jack. It limited his mobility a lot. It was painful. We talked to them about how it was gonna be when he returned, and his teacher sent him videos of them all wishing him well. They all made him a card. It was super cool. So the first week after surgery was hard, but made much easier by our Sutter Park community, right, buddy? I thank God for the fact that we were placed in this district, that, we did change houses, and my only criteria is that we stayed in Sutter Park District. I was like, we need to, I don't care what we have to do. Whether your child needs extra intervention or not,
Mama?
I think the baseline here is more than other schools. Even if you need the full day care, and your child has to go from this school to another, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it.
Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Present.
Mr. Wilson.
Here. Thank you very much for coming out in this mid-March blizzard, I guess, ice storm. I don't know what to call it. Hopefully it'll be nicer when we leave, but thank you for coming out. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the people who are up front here. On your far right is Board Member Kelly Davis. Next to her is Board Member Jennifer Best. Next to me here is our treasurer, TJ Cusick. And next to me on your left is our superintendent, Dr. Trent Bowers. Next to Dr. Bowers is Board Vice President Nikki Hudson. And on your far left is Board Member Amy. All right, at this time, the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'm not aware of any suggested changes to the agenda, so I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as made public on Thursday of last week.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion to approve the agenda and a second. No discussion, questions. Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes. Okay, at this time of the meeting, we have public participation, comments by visitors. The school board and the administration certainly encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear the views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. I will ask each speaker to please address the board at the visitors podium there on your right so that the speaker's remarks may be clearly heard by everyone in the room. The speaker should give his or her name, street address, and please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes, and the clock will be running there. Consistent with our policy 9130 on public complaints, we ask that any complaints about particular employees be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during the public session. I also want to remind all speakers that our district very much values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all our students and all community members. Again, we want to remind our community that we value public input and always appreciate when our community members remember our district's values, refrain from using harmful or offensive language, and share their comments in a civil and respectful manner. And again, it is not our practice, nor is it the practice of any board that I'm familiar with, to respond to remarks during the visitor comment section of our meeting. The first speaker who signed up was Suzanne. Okay, that's all the comments we have for today. At this time, we are going to have a progress report from the architects on our construction projects that are currently ongoing.
Good to go? Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Our CDA, Shore team, and our Russilli team are all here. They're all available for questions. I'm going to try to give the most of the summary of this report myself and then open it up for you guys to ask any specific questions you have because there's been a lot of participation at this point. We're 2 days away from as architects, one of our biggest milestones. We'll be turning over the documentation of Thomas to Russilli to do their final estimates and final guaranteed maximum prices and final schedules. But a lot of that work has been going on, and as we sit here tonight, Thomas is wrapping up. It contains all the things that we hoped it contained, and we're on budget. So I'm going to do some summaries of all the projects we're doing, but I'm going to focus mostly tonight on Thomas and give you a summary of where we're headed on Kilbourne. So we actually have a project under construction, the field house. I think it is technically the last project of the last bond issue, but it's certainly our first foray into construction this time around. We have a pretty sizable program that we've executed. We have 2 large locker rooms on each floor, public restrooms on each floor, concession stand on the lower level, and then on the upper level, we have those things again, and we have a team room and an observation deck that is pretty interesting, and it can see over the entire flats area of the site. So this is the computer model of what we showed several months ago. We are actually under construction. In fact, since I've done your presentation that you have, there was work that was being done on Saturday. And so this is a very active project with a lot of progress. We have the insulated high-R block going up. You can see it looks like the brick finish. We have the foundations poured. And we got to the point where in your packet, all the construction of the first floor was ready for the second floor deck. So here's a picture looking high up over the development. And over the weekend, these precast panels were all delivered in place and put in place. So we are ready now to go up to the next floor with the floor planks. There's the overhang, that's the observation level, and also going to get planked. And then underneath that is kind of a protected overhang for the concession stand, serving the lower field level. And that's what that looks like as those panels went into place. And in the context of our big presentation tonight in high school, you can see at the lower level, the lower left level of your screen, we have the context of that model in place. We don't have the field's grandstands modeled, but we do have the field house in our overall model for Thomas. So getting to Thomas, as I said, this is my 30th high school I've worked on in my career, and Kilbourne will be the 31st. And I think I always look for what's different, what have we learned, what's distinctive. And in this district, whether it's a trend, whether it's always been, or whether it's something very new, I don't know because I've only been here for a few years. But the engagement of folks in this district is incredible. It's distinctive. The principals have been breathlessly involved in all of the decisions we've made. The leaders of the program, Randy and Jeff and Tim, have been involved in every step of the way. But the amount of time we've spent touching points with teachers and students has been, again, that distinctive part. I'm used to having 2 what we call department design meetings for science, for art, for music, for English. You go down the road. We've had almost 4 of those kind of touch point meetings with every department at Thomas, and we're headed that same direction in our next phase at Kilbourne. So I think it's really interesting when I look at what's different about this project, and I look at the results. I see a lot of things that make me very proud as an architect, but also very impressed that they're so distinctive to Worthington schools. So going back to our site and reminding us of the existing site, again, I think I did a presentation over a year ago about how intimidating the development of the site was, how many years it had taken to get to this point, how many additions to the school it had taken to get to that point. And we wanted to be sure that we saved the investment in the site as much as practical, and that we made a school fit this site like it was first built that way. The last thing you want to do is adapt a school to a site and have it look like it was never put in the right place. So we opted early on to sit on the footprint, in fact, to sit on 2/3 of the footprint of the former Thomas. So while we're saving the gyms, we're putting a much more compact and a much larger building on a much smaller footprint. And that allowed us, to save a lot of investment in the existing site infrastructure, but B, it allowed us to make some new improvements. And the biggest one of those improvements, I think, is we can circumnavigate the building now. We have access for fire trucks and first responders and buses and cars and parents and students that can go all the way around this school 360 degrees. We have parking and entrance on the north. We have parking and entrance on the east. We have a visitor drive and parking on the south. And we still have the largest amount of existing parking on the west side. And some very cool, and we'll see some images of it in just a second, some very cool ideas about how to do buses and parents and drop off, getting kids and people to a pedestrian way and not crossing traffic at any point after they get out of the vehicle. So here's our sort of today's site plan. It's pretty small on this view, but again, what I like is there's some new things that are happening, and the reason those new things are happening is because we saved that space. We ostensibly put the field house where the old field house was. We didn't eat up any additional site footprint for that. We have room for 2 practice fields, one that's coming right away and one that's an alternate for the future. We've saved the front athletic fields and green space. We've saved the setbacks. We've saved the pools, not only for our benefit, but for anybody's benefit. We haven't required any kind of relocation of that. And we were able to not only relocate and sort of recorrect the orientation of the baseball field, we were able to pull the varsity softball field along with it. So we have a baseball stadium access where the 2 fields work together and share a lot of facilities. And we have more parking, parking that used to be where the building sits. So we like that. We haven't added any curb cuts to any public right-of-ways, and mostly that's been at the city's request, but we do have a site traffic study coming. All the data gathering is done, but we don't have the results yet. And if there are any warrants for changing the timing of lights or changing the location of curb cuts, that would come from this study. And we don't have that yet, but I feel very, very good about what we've done in concert with the city and the city engineers about the way we're doing traffic on the site. And then the last piece that the city asked us to consider, so we have considered it from the standpoint of the design, is how to accommodate a multimodal path along 161 that allows for their master plan in terms of the city's connectivity to work. So we're showing a meandering path. It doesn't take out any trees. It stays a safe distance from the street, and it connects to some of our infrastructure that we're adding. So that is a part of our design. It is not part of our package to deliver on. That's something to work out with the city, but it is something we've contemplated. And then we've contemplated traffic. And I spent a couple mornings and a couple afternoons with Pete, and I watched what happens on the site with cars and buses. It's an amazing thing, like all high schools. And what he said is it's an organic thing. I love that word because nobody does the same thing every day. Sometimes a parent does a 3-point turn right in the middle of the drop-off lane. Sometimes a kid goes into the school and then runs back out and has to unload his tuba from the trunk that he forgot. Sometimes parents try to go the wrong way. They go behind Evening Street and try to sneak out to Evening Street from behind the school. There's just all kinds of things that people will do in an organic way. What we try to do is give Pete more flexibility. The circumnavigation is by far the biggest piece, but we've increased the amount of access for buses. We've increased the stacking for buses. We've increased the stacking and access for parent drop-offs. We've kept student access and teacher access, and we've added to it. We've created additional parking. The gold lines are for the users of the site. And we've allowed all the pedestrian paths to be much safer in terms of how they get to from the building and to and from the right-of-ways, the public streets. So we'll probably have some conversation about that. This is the front view. This is the package. What I'm struck by here is not only do we have a very good compact building, we have orientations of daylighting to the south and the north. We have very good sustainability practices with this building. We have light reflective roofs. We have compact volumes, but yet we still have daylight and fresh ventilation to every teaching space in the building. So I like the results. I like the efficiency and the efficacy of the school in terms of economy, but I also like how it's going to perform from a sustainability way. And I love how much we've saved of the green and natural parts of the site, and I loved how much we're going to add to some of that with some of our decisions about the boulevards and the parking lots in new areas of the site. So this is our from the street kind of view. It's a really important one. The scale of this is the most important because it's the drive-by scale. It's the scale that I see whether I go to Thomas High School or not. It's something that everybody who drives on 161 is going to access, this kind of view. I feel like the scale works great. I feel like our starting point was sort of neoclassical, like Kilbourne Middle. I think we've reached that. We have very similar details and scaling. Although this is a much bigger building, we had to think about those kind of things. I worried about the 3 stories and the 70-foot height of the cupola as we started talking about that on paper. But as we finished designs and models and did these kind of views, I feel very good about it. And my sense is most folks at the city also feel very good about it because we will require some variances to get some of these heights and some of these scales done. At a close-up scale, close-up view, the scale has to change. It has to be different. Now we have mullions, we have doors, we have columns, we have railings that you see at a much bigger scale, but they start to break down and the bigger things start to go away. So as you get to these points, this is the bookend on one end of the 3-story wing. It works very well with the entrance balance. And then as you are a drive-up visitor, you see it at a more oblique angle and you get, again, different sense of scale, but it works. The landscaping works, the setbacks work. The safety of the pedestrian ways work. I think traffic flow with an exit for visitors now going around the building and even going out to Evening Street is a huge improvement for traffic. I know it's kind of important when I visit the school. I realize there's a point in time where buses are going to keep me from escaping the site. That will no longer be true if we had this kind of pattern, which we think we have in our design. Another big important view, the bus entrance. This is another one where, again, you're going to sit at a light here if you're a driver on the street, and you're going to see the school in this way. And again, I'm feeling very good about the width, the height, this depth, and the fact that we've treated the school on 4 sides. This is not a Hollywood facade. This is something that's part of the entire massing and design of the building. So let's start talking about that. As you see, we have some existing gym capacity that we're saving. We wanted to treat that with some new details. We wanted to provide daylighting to those spaces that it doesn't have now. We wanted to recreate the entrance on the east end and the west end to match the design and architecture on the front. And so we've done a little bit of sprucing up of the existing architecture there. And most important, I think most feedback we've gotten that's really positive from staff and students is we've created a new pedestrian boulevard. And that pedestrian boulevard allows buses on the south and parent drop-off on the north and access from students from the parking lot. And it allows people to get onto a pedestrian way and travel all the way into the building without crossing any traffic. And that's something you manage pretty well now, and you manage it intentionally, and now we're doing it passively. We're creating the opportunity to have that all happen passively. And so that view is a pretty extensive view. These new trees are a great opportunity for memorial trees, because I know we've lost a few in the process. But the idea of parents dropping off and buses dropping off, and none of that traffic mixing from a vehicle standpoint, but all of those pedestrians being able to find their way straight to the student entrance at the east side of the school. Sorry, west side. And as you get closer, those curves and those drop-off lanes peel away, and you get a better and better view of, again, we're pulling some of the architectural elements from the front facade into this side. We're providing some new windows and new openings in both the auxiliary gym and the competition gym. And we're really getting the scale and the articulation of the architecture to match the new with the old. Here's a more sun bright lit view of it. Then moving around the back, we have enclosures where we have things like generators and electrical transformers. We have a food service drop-off enclosure. We have a main building-wide loading dock area that's enclosed. None of those things are visible from the street, from the east, or from the west. There's a little bit of view of those from the street in the back, the way we access them. You can see now how the varsity baseball and the varsity softball start to work together. We're going to share facilities and have a lot of ability to extend those facilities and do things now in a place that's much closer to the school and the locker rooms. Here's a north view. You can see some new parking in place of some of the old parking that was on this side. But again, as we adjusted the field locations, we adjusted some of those widths. And the grades are good, the views are good, the sun in the eyes of the left fielder is gone for the baseball field. We listened to the folks who had to say something about what we wanted to accomplish here. And then while the back entrance may not be as important as it is today, it's in exactly the same place as it is today, and it is still there. So what we said to Pete and Emily is we want to allow you to decide at the end of the day, east, west, north, and south, what do you want to do with traffic? What do you want to do with people? What do you want to do with drop-off? And not cut you off and say there's only one way this design supports those things. There's multiple ways that this design supports those things. This is looking over the new parking lot on the east and the new entrance. This is all new architecture. You can see there in the middle of the screen the concealed loading dock that's all serviced from the back. It can't be seen from Evening Street. A little more directly online, and then getting down. So as you drive on Evening Street, the school will now have a presence because it'll have a door on this side. It won't just be the side view of the science classroom windows. It will be actually a facade. It's intended to be important and used. And for after-school events, there's a lot of parking here. For fine arts events, there's a lot of really close parking here. And for during the day, our contemplation is this will be a staff lot, but even that is not up to us. That's up to the school and how they ultimately use these entrances. So getting close up, you can see the east and west entrance have very similar articulations. And again, I think that makes this building read in a very specific way, all sides, all the way around. And then our last sort of corner view from the southeast, again, you can see the two-story bookends out at the 600-foot mark and the three-story bookends at more like the 300-foot wide mark. And again, all of this compares to the current Thomas that was over 825 feet from east to west. So we are in a much smaller place. This grass right here is where the science labs used to be in the old Thomas. So we're sitting on a much better footprint, and it gets better and better as we get inside. The design review board has worked with us. We've had 4 meetings with them. It's been very productive. We've done a lot of back and forth. On the 23rd of this month, we have our final building design review, hopefully for approval. We actually, at their request, created a sample of the actual brick that we selected so that we could make sure our renderings reflected the exact brick that is used. It's very easy for the computer to pick some brick colors and not really give the reviewers the precise sort of impression of what the final colors would be. These are actual. This is an actual brick sample that was built by Belden in Canton, and it's being used for us to make sure we render the building right. So as you can see from that picture with the photo balance card on top of the wall, our renderings are using that exact brick as a texture map. So we feel like the images that we're showing you tonight, all the outside image, are very carefully matched to actual brick samples. We've got some interior samples here on boards as well, and the same thing. Sometimes the renderings on the computer can get a little bit off in terms of the lighting or the projector that we're being used tonight. So we brought actual samples, and Jeff keeps those and has those on file for you to look at. So I'm going to walk in the building and talk about some important things. Again, I use this metaphor with the wheels leave the runway. When a plane takes off, it rattles and it shakes, and people look at each other like, are we going to make it? And just one of those things. But when the wheels get up off the ground, it's almost silent, and you still have these giant jet engines making the engine noise, but it's just such a difference to go from rolling on the ground at 600 miles an hour to flying in the air at 600 miles an hour. And I always say when the wheels leave the runway, it's that aha moment. And there have been several times in this project that I think the wheels have left the runway, and I'll show you the ones I think they are tonight. So as you get in the front door, this is the first thing you'll see. It's a 2.5-story atrium. It welcomes you to Thomas. The secure entrance for all visitors is to that door to the right. So nobody comes into the school without checking in and going through a protected entrance. You get inside, and you have that sort of main street of academic wing, the east-west corridor, but you also on each floor have a breakout space for students and visitors and whoever at each floor that can see outside and to see in that 3-story atrium. So it's kind of a cool feature. The width of the corridor actually undulates in different spacing. The minimum width is like 10 feet, but in some places it's 15 feet. In other places like this, it's almost 30 feet because there's this collection area for gathering space that's out in the academic corridor. As you move into the connector to the back half of the building, away from that academic raceway, you get into this middle connector. And what's cool about this is on the first floor, there's a lot of access to daylight into the 2 courtyards. The one courtyard, the larger one, is the art alley, and on the left, it's more of an academic courtyard, but you can get to them from this location. And the second floor connector, we've thinned up and we've created a bridge effect so that you can actually have those curtain walls be multi-story and gets lots of natural light into this part of the building. This is a view of that art alley. All the art rooms, some of the music rooms, the black box, they all open into this court for access, utility, delivery, outdoor activities, and it's all secure from the end. This is the intersection of High and Main. This is the main rotunda. It's a 40-foot diameter rotunda. So I will say 90% of the school traffic will go through this space every class change. And when that happens, there's plenty of room for that to happen. And where this gets great, you go left, it's athletics. You go right, it's fine arts. You go straight, it's the cafeteria student commons. And behind us is the connector to the academic wing. And then you step into the right in to the student commons. There's some low covered space, which is under the media center above us, and then it opens into a grand two-story space. If this doesn't sort of bring to mind, bringing along some of the best features of Kilbourne High School, I don't know what does. This to me right away said Kilbourne High School. And both are getting better because both have then made an issue out of this next space, and that's the space beyond the glass to the outside, in which both high schools, we want to have a protected gathering space that's a secure space in this building. But this is really cool. This is a space like nowhere in the current Thomas. There's very little places where students can feel they're a part of something. They're connected to different parts of the building, also connected to different environments like the quieter media center upstairs, the louder space here, and then outside into space that is literally outside in green. So we're very excited about this. We're feeling like this is going to be something that's, again, the oh my kind of view when people come in. And I think it gets better as we go upstairs. Our pre-function space for the auditorium is this exact same space. So as you come into this school, the things that happen in front of the auditorium are all happening in this large student commons. This is the back corridor going to that north door. Again, virtually exactly where that north door is today. This is the bridge above the connector. And this is a very cool space. This is the rotunda on the upper level. We are opening the floor and bringing daylight from the larger circle, not skylights, daylights, clear story. And this will be very well lit. This will be the connector from, again, behind us is academics, left and right are fine arts and athletics. Underneath us is administrative, but straight ahead of us is the media center. And again, a very big space by nature, by design, by desire of the staff and students. But the connection of this space visually to the student commons, and then more importantly, the connection of this space visually to the outside is where I think, again, the wheels leave the runway. This is a great space. You can imagine, the comment that there's spaces in this building where all people can thrive. And you hear that word neurodiversity, and everybody's wired differently. Some people want a quiet blue chair in the media center. Some people want a high stool in the noisy, active social media center. And some people want to be outside in the sunshine reading a book. And that can all happen within feet of each other in a place like this. And this is something the students and the staff drove, not just here at Thomas, but they drove it separately, but the same at Kilbourne. The different people in the room had the same comments about what they wanted to see in terms of these connections to these spaces. And then the outside space we showed in January, I think, again, another place where the wheels leave the runway. Really cool space, different kinds of seating, formal kind of sit and eat seating, formal kind of sit and informal kind of sit and read, wall edges you can sit on, green and plants and landscaping all over the place. And the nature of that feeling that it gives to people in a place where people can thrive who need this outside connection, it's really fantastic. So that's Thomas. And then I went back to November when Randy and I met with staff and students, and we sent a slide up at the beginning that we said, these are the kind of things that we aspire to achieve. What do you guys think of these things? And the personalized student experience was Randy's challenge that, again, we're all wired differently. You just saw what I think happened with that. Achieving high-level sustainability. We talked about daylighting. We talked about roof reflection. We talked about site footprint with a lot of green. We talked about window orientation for daylighting. We talked about retaining existing asset value. Our site is generally already existing. Our site portion of our costs are very, very low because of the decisions we made to put the footprint where we did. And then definitely at both schools, improving site traffic safety and building life safety. We've done it. We've circumvented the school for first responders. We've given people more ways in and out of the site safely. We've made a smaller building and an easier building with pathways to the outside that get students out of the building much, much more quickly. And then we've accommodated, again, at both schools, we'll talk about this, continuing operations. How do we phase and swing ourselves in and out of parts of these buildings so we can accomplish this project? And again, that's where Russilli, I think, has hit the ball out of the park. The blue line is where we are today. What you're looking at is the Thomas site map. Those 3 purple areas are times when we are going to take down parts of the building in 3 different phases. And those spaces below that are about a year long are the new projects that's going to happen, the new construction that's going to happen as those pieces fall into place. And the point is, in 30 months, all the new construction at Thomas will be in place. And in 36 months, all the new work at Thomas, including the final renovations of the auxiliary gym, which we're going to use for a lot of swing space, is going to be finished. And I think that's remarkable for given the complexity of our site and the size and scale of our building. Here's how it happens. This is the part we get to tear down first. It's probably the most panic-ridden because we're going to tear down stuff that gets used every day, the media center, some English classrooms, some Spanish classrooms. But Pete and Emily have worked on the way to make that happen. We're going to need modular classrooms for 1 year, just 1 year at Thomas, which is pretty remarkable, to take care of some of this very first phase displacement. And again, another place where I think the wheels leave the runway. After 1 year of construction, the school is going to move back into all new academic space. Reading, writing, arithmetic, science, technology. It's all going to be in space that's finished in 1 year. So, in the fall of '24, they're going to move back into an academic building. Yes, they aren't going to have their new cafeteria yet. They aren't going to have their new music space yet, their new auditorium yet. They're going to have their existing gyms, and they're going to have all new academic classroom space in 1 year. I think that's a really cool outcome of Russilli's phasing of this. Phase 2 will take the center core of the building down. We're going to keep the right side. That's going to be a lot of swing space, and still the cafeteria and kitchen are there. And we build the new cafeteria, kitchen, new administration, new special needs classrooms, all that's going to, the nerve center of the building, the rotunda at the middle of the building will happen. And then we will take down the last part of the existing building in phase 3, and we will put on the fine arts wing last. So the fine arts has the most wait, be patient and wait going on. It's going to be some of the coolest space because it's all being replaced. If you'll recall, our original plan for this building was not to replace the fine arts wing, is to keep it. But as we analyzed the amount of square footage, it was so far under square footage, we opted to replace it. And yet we're still on budget and still moving this project forward. So as we sit here today, design development, in 2 days, construction documents that will be turned over. We are on budget. We have a handful of alternates. We're talking about terrazzo upgrades for the flooring. We're talking about some turf upgrades for the infields at baseball and softball. Those things will be alternates. But as we sit here, what's in budget is a design contingency that Russilli holds over us in case we miss something. There's an owner contingency for the things you want to do, and then there is an escalation contingency for Russilli. And putting all those contingencies in the budget, we are still within the budget that we set aside at the beginning of this project. So I think it's remarkable. I think what we've achieved beyond our original vision and what the students and staff drove into this project, is distinctive. And so we're feeling really good. We have challenges coming. We'll talk about those in a minute. But Thomas in itself is sitting here as the biggest piece of this pie, and it's working very well. So moving on to Kilbourne. This is following up. We thought Kilbourne would be 3 distinct summer projects, that it'd be really small GMP packages over summers. And we've changed our mindset there, again, with a lot of help from Russilli. We are touching every square inch of Kilbourne. We are adding additional fine art space to Kilbourne. We are reprogramming some things at Kilbourne we never anticipated. But again, being driven by the students, by the staff, and being driven by what we learned at Thomas, we think we're following in the right footsteps here. So there's a long list of things. And the first part of the list is what I call program area additions. Reprogramming. We're adding restroom building to the stadium. We're adding a turf practice field and space and design for a second one. Here's a big one. We're converting the media center into admin and admin into the media center. Why are we doing that? It's because we want that same relationship between media center, student commons, and outdoor space that we are accomplishing at Thomas. Again, different groups of students drove the same result coming from those things. Another thing that teachers and students brought up that we didn't think about was getting indoor windowless classrooms in Kilbourne, and there was 8 of them, and get them to an outside wall. And to make that happen, we have to do some flipping of space. And again, teachers and students both said it. I'll tell you the truth, especially the teachers who live in those classrooms today. It's really hard to teach all day in a classroom with no windows. So we're taking care of that. We're converting those classrooms to teacher prep space. I told you about the Fine Arts Edition. We're converting locker bays into extended learning space. That was students. Take student lockers out, give us more space to do interaction with each other. That was theirs. Outdoor gathering space, it started with a social studies teacher, but then all the students jumped on. They said that would be fantastic. And if the pandemic taught us anything, we actually enjoyed going outside in temporary tent space during the pandemic so that we could be outside. And that sort of turned into and evolved into this idea of permanent outdoor space for both high schools. Then the next part of the list, where I draw the line, is the deep technical renovations. We're gutting science labs down to the studs. We're redoing group restrooms. We're redoing individual restrooms. We're renovating all the locker rooms. We're renovating the auditorium. We're renovating the competition and auxiliary gyms. And we planned on some kitchen improvements, but that's turned the corner into something much bigger and much more exciting. And then we're talking about the finishes of the building. All of the dismountable partitions we're repairing and replacing. All the ceilings and all the lighting in the school get replaced. All the flooring in the school gets replaced. All the paintable surface gets repainted. Indoor doors get replaced. Casework gets replaced. Furniture, with the exception of what's been bought in the last couple years, all gets replaced. Then we dive behind the walls and we look at stuff that is deep in the infrastructure, the HVAC, the Victaulic plumbing and HVAC connections, a new generator, technology and security improvements, elevator improvements, metal roof upgrades, window replacements, exterior door replacements, and a word we use a lot called IFAS, which is Exterior Insulation Finish System. That's getting repaired. And then there's some site challenges, and we're taking care of all those, and those were part of our original expectation. Revamping bus and parent drop-offs, just like we're doing at Thomas. Fixing site circulation from the front of the site to the back. Parking lot resurfacing all across the site, and a memorial boulevard and walkway, which again came up from parents and teachers and students about something they would like to see added to that project. So it's extensive what we're doing. There's no square inch being left untouched. And again, there'll never be a time in history where these two high schools won't be as close to each other, as exciting as each other, than they're going to be when these projects finish in '26. There's a little bit of a conceptual view of that outside platform that will come out of the large glass windows of the Commons. Again, same kind of ideas with green and furniture, different kinds of furniture for different kinds of people who thrive outdoors. Pretty interesting revamping of the kitchen. We started talking about just the basic needs of hoods and coolers, and Brian said there's a whole new way of doing food and wellness. We need to look at different ways of serving food and getting kids attracted to better diets. And so that's what's happening. We're going to have not only a revamped major food service, we're going to have a minor deli that operates outside the hours of the kitchen. That again, it look at these fruit and vegetable bars and things that we can do to, again, attract kids to a better diet. And this is what the serving area of the kitchen will become, much like a food court. And then this deli is on the north side of the cafeteria. It's closer to the auditorium, but it is a project where, again, the hours of the day, before school, after school, late in the afternoon, this can be open and be providing food service at different hours of the day. Again, student-driven, staff-driven, Brian-driven. It was a very good process. And another place where I really love what Russilli did, and the wheels were leaving the runway, is we're going to make this one project. We're going to put it all on paper now. We're going to bid it all this year. And we are going to start renovating Kilbourne in the spring of '24, and we're going to continue to renovate Kilbourne until the summer of '26. And so in 30 months, we're going to take Kilbourne, and instead of being 3 summer projects with early springs and late falls, we're going to have 8 phases. And yes, Eric and Erica have helped us talk about swing space. Where do we move science for the time it takes us to renovate science? How do we make all those things happen? And so Tony Russilli has come up with 8 phases that'll happen. Will be very quick moves, very good timing of moves like Christmas vacation and spring break and summers. And we will make this project a single beginning to end project with one bid and no escalation by bidding it all in the fall of '24, or '23, sorry, spring of '24. So I think it's very exciting. I think we'll get much more done. And it's true that we've been ambitious. We've lifted ourselves far beyond what we originally thought we would be doing at Kilbourne, but it's all good. And when we try to prioritize it or take scope out, we decided the better way is to figure out a better way to purchase it, buy it, and leverage it so that we get more of what we want. And so we're sitting at the end of schematic design. We were about 6% over budget. Our engineers are working on ways to trim that down. And as we sit here today, I think we've just crossed under the 3% over budget threshold. And by the time we get to design development where we are at Thomas, I think we'll be standing here before you saying we can get it all for the budget we have. We have some work to do. We have some decisions to make. And our worst case is we have to decide to do a few things by alternates that allow us to make those decisions when we see where we're bid. Because again, escalation is in this. Design contingency is in this, and owner contingency is in this estimate. And so as we look at the ways to balance all those out, I think we'll be back to you with very good news on Kilbourne as we did with Thomas. Little Fieldhouse project, have to give Kilbourne's due to Thomas's due. We're doing a visitor side Fieldhouse, going to add a lot of capability and services here and save us from a lot of traffic control trying to get around to the other side of the stadium. So this is a building a little smaller. It's concession, restrooms, and some support spaces for Kilbourne, but primarily, ostensibly for the visitor side to keep that traffic from the home side. And again, a lot of distance traveled. We ran into a little snafu here. This was supposed to be an early summer project, but the city of Cincinnati, the city of Columbus, just like the city of Cincinnati, they want us to upgrade our water and sewer services to current code. Kilbourne was built 30 years ago to different codes. They don't want us to start our first little tiny project and not bring all of the water and sewer things up to code. That might cause this project to slip a bit. We know we were putting in new water service and new sanitary service as part of the high school renovation. We weren't planning on doing it as part of this little building first out of the gate. But the city is being insistent on that issue, so we're facing that challenge. Lastly, natatorium. We've had some great meetings. We've talked to all 11 teams who compete in water in this district. We've talked to Swim Inc. We've talked to lots of folks who know a lot about pools. We visited pools, especially Upper Arlington. The biggest thing we've accomplished, I think, is taking the existing natatorium away before we have the new one open would be extremely challenging for the teams to find space off-site to do what they do. So we've opted for a site just south of the existing natatorium. It allows us plenty of room. It doesn't get into the way of much. It keeps us related to the outdoor pools as we are today. It keeps us in the same position on the site as we are today. And the old footprint of the natatorium is potentially can become parking. So there is some direct, ultra convenience parking to the natatorium, as well as all the parking on the site of Thomas that supports the natatorium. So we're feeling like we've got some of the big decisions made, and now we're working on how to make it all come together economically. We have a big shell. We want to make sure that shell is built in a way that's very economic. We have a pool that's very simple. We're opting for 10 lanes because of the flexibility it gives those 11 teams. There's actually times when diving and swimming and water polo can actually coexist in different parts of the pool. There's also shallow parts for teaching swimming, and there's deep parts for diving. But it is a single tank and a very simple building and a very simple pool. So we're very hopeful. We are just now getting into the different options for the building shell that help us get into budget for this project. But it is an exciting project. I was a swimmer my whole childhood, and seeing a new pool get built is something pretty radical for me. It's exciting. And so we'll be back to you with the estimate for the schematic design estimate, and we'll be back to you with options to keep it in budget. That's our goal. That's our challenge. That's our requirement. So I said that before, and I'll say it again. All right. Sorry I took too long, but it's a big project, a lot going on. I have all these experts here that can help me answer technical questions, and I'm going to try to bring you all up to where you want to be tonight.
Thank you very much. And first of all, you did not take too long. This is an extremely important project, both financially and its impact for a long, long, long time on this community. So we appreciate the presentation. And just to give you a context, we wouldn't even be starting the meeting if this were last year. So you finished it even before we would normally be done. So, or starting our meeting. So glad to have questions, comments from any board member. Amy, go ahead.
I can start. I have a little bit of a list. So I'm going to try to go in order of your
Okay,
presentation,
great.
if that makes sense. That's kind of how I jotted down my notes as you were talking. So I'll start with the site at Thomas. You talked about parking, and I was curious as to overall, are we increasing the
Yes.
number of parking or decreasing the
We're
number of parking?
increasing 250 spaces overall.
Okay, and then 250, is that what you said?
200, that's a number I can't guarantee you, but
Okay.
I will get that answer to you.
But it's increased.
It's increasing,
That's
yes.
So my question is, you talked about, studying the site, and I'm curious as to if you've studied the site when there's been other events going on at Thomas, and
Yeah, and-
specifically accessing the auditorium. Because I will say this hadn't occurred to me until tonight. I am a little concerned about, because of where the auditorium is going to be now, how much parking is. I just know what it looks like when there's an event at Thomas in that auditorium, and how the parking is utilized. And so you have people that park at Evening Street in the parking lot, people that park all the way over on the west side of the site in the parking lot. So I just was
Yeah.
curious if
So
you.
the west parking is always your big player. It's because it's got the most spaces. The new deal and the new secret is there's going to be 300-ish spaces now to the east of the building where the science wing sits. And so your access, if you're early enough, is to park in the teacher's parking lot and go into the auditorium from that side. There's also 100 plus spaces to the north where teachers will park, and that's going to be into the same entrance where a lot of people come today that park on the north side. And again, it's those who get there early. The people who park in the student lot, the ones that don't get there early, they're going to have to traverse the red line. They're going to have to come in the west entrance and still walk to the center of the building, and the auditorium will be right there. So the auditorium is no further than it is today from the student lot. It's much closer to parking that's going to be added that's never existed on this site, like where the science wing sits.
Right.
So it's better. Is it good enough? I don't know. Parking is always a challenge. Sites that are in communities where there is street parking nearby, that's considered a plus, not to the people who live on those streets, but to the folks who know that if the parking lot's full at the last minute, there's always maybe somewhere you can park across the street or down the street. Again, communities always wrestle with that. There's no way to provide enough parking for everything that could possibly go on simultaneously at this high school, but I think we're doing much better than today with it.
Well, and I think that if we're increasing spaces,
Yeah.
that's huge. And as it exists right now, there's a lot of parking that's unstructured, I will call it, because
Yeah.
there's not lines or,
You could sneak
what I'm
down to the
talking
flat
about. I
if you had to park.
People get creative
Yeah.
in their parking. So, okay. So then you also mentioned about the multi-use path in front of the building. And you said that's still to be worked out with the city. And
Right. It's part of their development master plan. It's part of their transportation and throughput. It's a multimodal path. If you look at our needs to get pedestrians to the building, you would come from the west and go up the bus lane. You'd come from the east and you'd come catty corner at McConnell. You wouldn't need to get to our school by walking up and, walking east and west on 161. But if the city wants to provide access to other places in Worthington via the north side of 161, we're saying that there's room for it. We're not sure whose responsibility and whose priority it should be. We wouldn't put that path in if it were me choosing and making all your decisions, because it doesn't help kids get to the school. It helps people go past the school. And that might be very important to a lot of folks. It's not necessarily important to me as your architect of a new high school, because your kids are going to get to the school in different ways in that path.
So as far as the design of the path that's shown on this drawing that's up on the screen, is that's just a placeholder
It's a
right
draft
there?
placeholder suggestion from us, just to say, hey, yeah, it will work. It won't displace the soccer field or the band field. It won't get in the way of too many trees. And I first thought they wanted to put it right up against the asphalt, and I thought, well, nobody's going to walk there. But they didn't. They wanted some green space. So we are just suggesting there's an opportunity to develop this path, whether it's us or not. The city has made it a priority for us to consider it.
Okay, and I guess that's what my question was kind of leading to is what you're showing here, what's been discussed with the city in terms of where the placement
Yes.
would be?
And it's not in our estimate that's on budget today either. It's just something we've said, this is a place that will accommodate this path. We've got to decide who and how to execute it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my next question is about baseball and softball fields.
Okay.
You made a comment about the orientation of the baseball field currently and removing the sun from the left fielders.
Right. So the field's turned the other way now. So if you're in left field in the afternoon.
But the softball field will be oriented the same way as the baseball field is currently. So is that still going to be an issue? And have the coaches been consulted regarding that concern?
You don't get the mile-high flies in softball that you get in baseball. I don't think it is. It's not. The baseball field is in a better orientation. The other point about the baseball field was the downfield left line was limited by the woods because of the property line, and now it's not limited by the woods. We got a full 300 feet down line.
I just bring that up because that struck me as. Are we creating a new problem?
No, that's a very good question. I have never had softball coaches tell me the same problems in the sun that I've had baseball.
Okay.
Because of the height and the fly path of balls.
Okay.
But it's a great question.
Okay.
So I will ask your softball coach what they think of that.
My next question is it's kind of just a comment, I guess, about the elevation. It really struck me looking at the presentation tonight, and hadn't really as much before, but obviously we're keeping the existing gyms, and that has a brick on it. But then the rest of the new structure has a different brick on it.
Well, not the same manufacturer from the same plant as the old gyms do, because that's probably not even available, but it's very much a compatible range brick. So when you look at those colors in that sample panel, I forget if I'm headed to it. I guess I am headed to it.
Well,
if you look at that,
I guess just my question is or observation is, when you go back to one of those renderings where you see the whole thing, I mean, I'm assuming the colors are all pulling.
Right.
It's just that one's more of a solid field, and that's got some more.
There's more range
ondulation and color in that.
So the gym will look
an observation.
more similar brick. It doesn't have the depth of range in it as you look in that view.
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to go outside and see it. But I think it will be very compatible. It will be. You will notice it. You even see in this view. This has more browns and lights in it. That is more of a less range, more oranges and reds, but not the outside part of the range. So there will be a little difference. At Tecumseh High School, we actually stained that gym brick with just a few bricks. Every square feet, we added a dark and a light, and we matched it. But we think we're close enough here that you see almost the tighter range in the brick reds will be inside the color that's on the front and on the new architecture.
Okay.
So we think we're okay. But it's a good observation.
I just wanted to make sure that just clarifying that the rendering is truly reflective of what we think that's going to look like as close as possible, right?
Yeah. And that ARB asked us to be, you were part of that. We want to make sure that those bricks next to each other will be compatible. They won't be a perfect match. That's a very true statement.
Okay, thank you. My next questions are on the floor plans.
Okay.
You talked a lot about the connector hallway that connects between the academic wing. And I was just curious if you could reiterate what the width of that is.
Yes.
I know that in the community meeting, we had several community members, and I continue to have several community members concerned about both the width of that hallway and then just the access, the travel distance between say I guess it's the southeast corner to like the music area and how you have to go through. So I was wondering if you could just speak to that and what you analyzed.
600 feet. That's less than the 800 or so feet we are at the current building. And north to south, we're about 400. So when you come in this front door, when you come in this door, this distance from here to here is about 150 feet. And that connector hallway is 30 feet wide. Which is wider than the current entrance into the gym is because it's 30 feet wide, but then there's the bathrooms that take it down to about 15 feet. So the new connector between the gyms, not the new one, but the opened up one because the bathrooms will disappear, will be the same width as that hallway north-south is, connecting the rotunda at 40 feet to the front door at 30 feet. So a 30-foot hallway will seem, big, very big. And it won't seem not crowded. It will seem crowded, but it will work because it's so much bigger than your current hallways.
And I think that comment is just coming from students that we have that have some accessibility challenges with how they move through our building, like making sure that obviously, you all have to comply with the ADA and the code and all of that, but just also taking into consideration logic, right? I guess that's really where my question is.
We put an
going.
elevator at the rotunda, and we put an elevator at the intersection of blue and gold in the academic wing. So if a kid is going from science to English in this wing, they can stay in that wing. If they are going to this student commons and then they want to go up to the media center and they're handicapped, there is an elevator right in the core of the building for that. So you're saying it's right. It's about practical, not about just meeting ADA. I mean, we're ADA accessible with one elevator, but we added a second because of the practical use. Not sending a kid down to the academic wing to go from the commons to the media center, just to go out and up.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question about the commons. I was going to ask a question about if we had smaller cafe type spaces for the kids to eat, but I think you answered that in your presentation when you talked about the media center. But my other question I have is at Worthington Kilbourne, you talked about that we're creating you called it a deli space.
Yep.
That's near the auditorium. Do we have that same space
Yes,
at Thomas?
we do.
Okay.
I didn't point it out, so I'm glad you mentioned it. It's here. It's on the south wall of the student commons. There is that same sort of coffee shop deli area. Then the main food service is on the west.
Okay, thank you. And then this is something you didn't mention, but it's just a question I have. I just want to make sure when we talk about accessibility, are we replacing the bleachers at Thomas?
Yes.
Okay. What about at Kilbourne? They're remaining?
I don't remember what we said about the competition bleachers at Kilbourne, but I know we're replacing all the bleachers at Thomas. They are replaced? Okay, thank you. They are.
Okay. And then I was wondering, you talked about alternates for Thomas, you talked about terrazzo, and I was wondering if you could talk about where that material,
It's
and terrazzo is a
poured-
superior material.
Yeah, it's forever
It's
floor.
a great
Yeah,
flooring. We have it in a lot of our elementary buildings. It will stand the test of time, absolutely. You can sand it and refinish it if you have to.
It's forever.
It's wonderful, but I was just, and so I think that's great if we can afford it, but I was curious.
Right,
as
so
to
we
where
think that
it's slated to go.
the student entrance to the rotunda, the student commons, and the north-south hallway should all be terrazzo if we can afford it. It's a $30 a square foot floor compared to the $9, $10, $11 square foot floor that's LVT. So we have it as an alternate. It is expensive as a material, but it's most expensive. It puts a headache on their plate because you have to vacate that area of the building while you're doing terrazzo. You can't walk in the hallways to get to the cafeteria while you're pouring terrazzo. So it's an impact on time and it's an impact on cost. So we're doing it as an alternate. I noticed today that this week that Lancaster High School found the money to put terrazzo in all the main hallways in the cafeteria. And I hope we can match that. But it's an expensive thing. It's not in our budget, but if we have a good bid day and our contingencies don't get used up, there's a place that we can focus it right there.
We want to break that down. The rotunda, we have an alternate in itself. And then we've got some on the main.
Just push it once, is that how you do it? And then there's some, and then there's some going east and west. So we're gonna have probably 4 alternates with terrazzo because it's so expensive. So it'll allow us to prioritize which areas we want it. We're just not gonna get one number because it's gonna be pretty high. So we're gonna break it down into phases or areas for which.
So I hope Paul didn't swear in his email today, but he did a sketch. You have it? There it is. All that bright blue is potentially wishing to be terrazzo. So that's where we're headed. But our base bid is LVT.
Okay, thank you. And then I have just, I think, one question for Worthington Kilbourne High School.
Okay.
And it's related to the outdoor eating area.
Okay.
And it's probably just the rendering, but I'm just curious how we've kind of analyzed safety there, because that railing looks really low to me.
Yeah,
And
it's just
obviously, I know it needs to be 42 inches,
Right.
but it doesn't look like 42
Right.
inches in the rendering, but
And
I
so
just
is
was
it
curious if you could
44
speak to
and then
that.
does it have an additional height to it for protection? You know, when I first did Lakota High School, it had a 42-inch railing down the entire commons. And they said, you know, freshmen are going to go over the first day. And it's never happened in 25 years there. They actually did do some gravity Isaac Newton tests they drop bowling balls into a net below off the railing there. But it's never happened. It's still very, very important to think about. It's a pretty good fall. It's 40-ish feet to the bottom of the ravine. So it's something, I think we have to think about something probably higher than the 44 required by code.
Okay, so to be determined
Yeah.
on how that's going to
And even if that
there.
thing is going to stretch across the whole ravine, or it's going to be two bigger pieces that stay in the corners, because we have to be very careful about getting structure down in the ravine. We don't want to affect the water quality, or the water pathway. So that's all to be determined. But we know how important that outdoor space is. We don't know what shape it's going to be yet.
Okay. Well, and that's my last question. So thank you for answering all
Absolutely.
my questions. I appreciate the presentation this evening, and I look forward to seeing our GMP numbers when they are ready.
Thank you, Amy, for very great questions.
Glad to go next.
Okay.
We checked a number of my boxes. Thank you, including the height of the railing. I think
You're
every
right.
parent kind of looked at it that way. You talked a bit about accessibility and elevators. Thank you for doing so. Can you talk also about restrooms and gender-neutral restrooms?
Yes. Every location of what we call large group restrooms has a significant number of unisex restrooms that are individual for teachers, for a father to change a young daughter's diaper when they're at a show, all the things you would need with a single one-off restroom. There's a lot of those, just like we did with the middle schools. We focused a lot on making sure that those options are everywhere the same. There's also individual restrooms in every teacher department office for teachers. And so anywhere you go, you don't find a group restroom that doesn't come with small individual restrooms, breakout restrooms for any use, for whatever privacy the situation dictates, whether it's staff, whether it's students, whether it's special needs students with an adult assistant, whether it's a gender thing, it's all covered, it's all there. And it's available.
Excellent. Can we talk a little bit about, I understand the traffic flow. And I know you mentioned that there's a traffic study that is underway and that we don't have the results of that yet. Even with a traffic study, if we have parents going from east and west of 161 going in the same point of entry as buses, regardless of the cadence of the light at that intersection, you're always going to have flow from one side or the other. So you're always going to still have backup.
On 161?
On 161. Okay. So I wanted to propose that we look at, it's hard to see in this one. Let me see if I can find one where you
there's some breakout ones where we just have
visibly see it.
flow like that.
15 gives an aerial view.
Oh, okay.
And it's just an aerial view. There is a path on the east side of the building that would basically be from where our current teacher parking is on the west side of the MAC that goes down to 161 where you are essentially not touching trees, mature trees that are there. And so I know that there's some reservations about traffic coming in from 161 and exiting onto Evening Street. And so I merely wanted to present or propose that we look at whether or not, instead of, in addition to it exiting off of Evening Street, because flexibility is very important, right? And having options, that we could look at that entry off of 161 and then exiting back to 161. That would obviously require city approval because we would need another light there to exit.
So the city's concern is,
close in proximity to the light at 161 in Evening Street.
The rule of thumb is 700 feet if there's continuous traffic. So because there's a slip lane that doesn't have to stop from Evening Street to 161, we'd be, down here somewhere with that curb cut. Now, if they decide that the value of that curb cut is far better than the slip lane on Evening Street, then we could be lining up like you said. And so the city said if there's warrants driven by the traffic study to change the light timing, and again, a lot of schools have a very long ingress because of what you said in terms of the 161 south, the further one to the west. And again, this slip lane was added recently. It allows traffic to continuously get onto 161 and get up to speed without waiting on what's happening with the light. It completely misses, detours the light. And if that were to stay, I think, just from my experience, we'd be way down here with the curb cut. And maybe that's still something to look at. And so the city said, we're not saying no changes. We're saying show us what the loads are. And then if there's timing changes or other kind of changes, we also debated this gate that stops people from getting to Evening Street from the high school being a one-way out, because we certainly want it to be used. Because there's a slip lane on Evening Street now, that would be a really nice way to get to 161 if it's allowed. And so we're hoping that it's a one-way gate that allows people to continuously exit, but not necessarily come the wrong way in there. But that may change too, based on the traffic study.
Sure. And I appreciate the fact that you're looking for setting us up to have flexibility. The last thing I want is 30 years from now, we have a group of people in this room who are looking at Thomas and trying to solve traffic issues like we're trying to solve traffic issues at Kilbourne. And one point of entry, regardless of the cadence of lights, one point of entry for parent drop-off from east and west on 161 is not going to solve that traffic.
It's a challenge.
The traffic backup that we have right now. So I appreciate the fact that you guys are looking for alternatives and flexibility on the site to give us options. Amy hit on a lot of my other issues. I'm going to go ahead and throw out the last one, and
Okay.
I hope that I'm not, no one throws anything at me. If everyone has been in this room has been through Upper Arlington's high school, it's a beautiful school, right? It's something that we toured and thinking about renovating Thomas. I think that one of the key things that, and they're very different sites and they're very different challenges and all of that. What I'm going to pivot to is the aesthetics. And one of the things that I think makes Upper Arlington aesthetically pleasing is very simple color designs. And they don't have a bunch of patterns everywhere. Everything's not accented with an accent color. They have yellow and black and white, and I think that's it.
That's it.
I think our patterns our aesthetics, personally, to my personal aesthetic, again, this one person looks very busy. And there's lots of accent color in there and patterns where I don't think there needs to be. You could go through to the picture of the cafe, which was on 58. And everything's accented with something. And it's just, it's busier than it needs to be. And I think in retrospect, our middle schools look great and they're busier than they need to be from a color and a pattern perspective. And that's not just me, those are comments that I've heard from others as well. So I would encourage us to do in the situation less, maybe more, and to go with a simpler aesthetic palette. So that's.
Okay, I'm going to channel my wife, the interior designer, and say something that I think is important because I've realized it, is there's very few people who could tell you the colors in the floor at the Kilbourne Student Commons because there's always tables, there's always people, there's always activity, and you don't notice things the way they're prominently created to be noticed in renderings like this. So still agree with your comment. We can certainly revisit the density of color patterns and details, but for the most part, I think you'll find it the day you occupy it. What everybody will notice is the white, light-colored walls that are 80–90% of the surfaces and the ceilings that are white. And they will notice there's red and blue Thomas colors in a lot of places, but it's never going to be dominant because of all the other things that happen in the school. That's her saying that. I'm listening to you as an architect, and I agree. We can certainly
and obviously,
play around
don't
with
just
that.
listen to me.
Right.
Pull other people. But I will tell you, if you walk into some of our middle schools right now that were renovated, there are certain common space areas where it looks busy, even with people. So that's
Yeah.
that's my
The floor pattern at Kilbourne is busy. It's lighter colors, but it is busy. And again, I don't know if you notice that when you go there. But it's a good comment. And I hear it a lot.
I'll just chime in here and say that I agree
Yeah.
with that comment.
Okay.
That is a comment that I've heard a lot from community members, is that, and I think a lot of it has to do with also, like, talking specifically about the middle schools, is just like the changing of colors and stuff. Because I do think in the hallways. I don't disagree with you that in big spaces like the commons where it's not as, you've got tables and stuff, but I think it's more of the hallway spaces and stuff where there's a lot of colors going on is where that's where the common is coming from. So I would agree with
So
that.
you see, right at this intersection, there's that red pattern and there's some carpet under here. But you look all the way down this 300-foot corridor and there's nothing but tans and grays. And then there's dark blue sign panels that identify the rooms. So, there's going to be acres of this school that doesn't have a lot of color. And there's going to be some spaces that have heavy blotches. And we need to find the right balance. So
Right.
I appreciate your
And I think a
comment.
lot of it's in the vinyl flooring is where
Yeah. And if
the changes
we get
have
terrazzo,
colors.
it gets much more muted. In the polyacrylate, matrix, it gets much lighter.
So thanks for not throwing anything at me.
No. I hear it all the time.
And
Architects like gray, black, and white, if you listen to my wife. Interior designers that bring the color.
And so, and take that comment with a grain of salt, and that it is not lost on any of us that this is a very, very complex site. So we know that you have jumped through tremendous hoops to come up with solutions that work for our students and our teachers, and we're grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jennifer?
Okay, well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for sharing all the renderings and pictures. It was really, really fun to see what it's going to all look like. I have a question about the Kilbourne drop-off and pickup, because I lived that for 8 years, and I know it's a disaster. What is changing about it?
Okay.
What's
I don't
gonna
have
be
a drawing. I
different?
should have brought one because we're still designing it. But we're changing the inflow of the two ingresses. They're not really changing because of distances and lights and train tracks. That's really going to stay. But when you get to the bottom of those points, there's going to be a lot more choices. There's going to be a lot more lanes across the front of the school. Some of them are bypass lanes to get people out of the site from the back and in from the west. Some of them will be parent parking lanes, drop off and stay there. Some will be bus-only lanes. Some will be pedestrian access points, the same sort of boulevard approach that we try at Thomas. It's coming for you. It's a great question.
Okay.
It's the number one challenge that we heard about
yeah.
at Kilbourne. That railroad track does more damage to your ability to do different things with your egress and ingress than we imagined. And then the ravine cuts you in half north and south, so there's a tiny little throttle bottleneck coming from the back. But we're working on both of those, and we have really big changes in that front of the building that change what cars go where and why, so that all night long you'll see cars just going straight to the light to get out, and other people, there'll be parents parked there waiting for their band kid to come out of the high school.
And so all those additional lanes, does it still leave room for the band to practice out front?
It does, and we've heard loud and clear, that's a great field as an asset. We want to keep it. It does move the band tower probably tighter to the edge of the field than the band director wishes, but he understands that the extra traffic is a plus.
That's still there. I mean, it's fun as a community member to see them practicing.
It's
out
fantastic
front.
to have that
I think
space.
everybody likes that, so. Okay, and then, I guess I should be careful about this. The other question is kind of about timing, lead time on equipment. I know we've so many delays the past couple of years. Is that getting better? Is it planned on?
I learned a new
timing?
word to this project. It's called the enabling package. The enabling package is to order all those things that take 12 months to get here: generators, HVAC, fan machine, all the stuff that's way ahead. We're going to purchase and buy way before we need it. And that enabling package is going out pretty soon. In fact, was there a pre-bid today for it? Correct. Okay. So they actually had a pre-bid meeting today for the enabling package. And that package will buy those things that you're worried about. Because no, it hasn't gotten better. It's still 14 months to get a generator for a school. If I ordered today, it'd be a year and 2 months before it got here.
And are you finding that electrical equipment is even slower
It's the
than
worst.
like the HVAC and other things? Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Switchgear is the worst. And people are actually making switchgear out of parts because it's faster than buying switchgear from the people who assemble those parts. But we're doing the same thing with the enabling package.
it'll be all part of this package?
Mhm.
Okay, that was my biggest concern
Yeah,
coming
it should be.
from my home questions.
It's terrible out there.
Okay, that's all I have. They've asked so many good questions down there. So thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you for your questions. Kelly?
All my questions were taken.
Okay. Any new ones?
Thank you very much for this
Yeah.
presentation. I will, it is one that I'll have to look at again and again, just because there is so much to absorb, but I appreciate you taking the time and coming to present this evening, and my colleagues have asked such great questions. I really don't have anything additional at this time, but I know that I can reach out to one of you or our administration.
Well, you guys know this, but you have a best-in-class operation in this district, and you're leading that as board members, so congratulations. I just think this is going to be outstanding. And we're going to be bringing a lot of people who wanted to go to Upper Arlington to come see Thomas and Kilbourne instead, because we're doing a lot of very cool things.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Thank you for taking the time to take us through this at a very good pace. Can't thank you enough. This is way outside my expertise, but I do have a few questions that haven't, whether some have been touched upon. Number one, I hope that at all times throughout the whole project, accessibility for each and every student in all parts of both buildings and the field houses are given utmost consideration, not just going to ADA minimum, but is it really practically accessible? And you made a reference to that word. Is that one elevator is enough for ADA, but it's not enough for our students.
Right.
So I guess, are you comfortable that, I just, from a budget standpoint, I think that's a really, really important issue because as you know, well, first of all, ADA can change, ADA guidelines can change. Retrofitting is very, very expensive. So let's do it right the first time when it's cheaper than retrofitting, although it can be expensive. Are you comfortable?
I am, and it's not just handicap accessibility, it's just normal everybody accessibility. Right. You can't go out to the street to get around the construction site and then walk back up the sidewalk to the gym in any practical way. We have to keep internal connections. We have challenges. We've challenged the principals not to panic, but to stay very engaged and tell us, this day we have this going on. We need extra consideration for quietness, for access, for separation, for going outside for an assembly. We need those things to happen, and Russilli will be daily responding to those requests. So it's very much a give and take, but we've already told the principals, there's going to be challenging days, but you have to be totally ready to punt and tell us how we have to punt to keep up with your needs.
And Charlie, the first floor is all on the same level. You know how there's changes currently. We've designed this in such a way that it is level, and then on the east side, I don't know if you to there, but there are tiered parking on that east side. So again, we got rid of all those ramps and so forth. So the first floor is accessible.
Yeah, the final product is easy. We'll make sure, but it's the interim product that it's still real. It's still years of schooling for these kids. Right. We still have to make sure those pieces fit and they work.
And as I've found out, not firsthand, but talking to students of mine and former students of mine, just one curb or one step can make, even though there's a way to get to an elevator, if you go clear around the building and so it satisfies ADA, but it means there's a whole space where
and that
it's
timpani,
really not practically.
Yeah, that timpani stops. It doesn't pick itself up. It doesn't go over that curb. It just stops right there. Yep, I know.
Okay. All right. With respect to elevators and staircases, and again, I am no architect, no builder, no interior designer, but I do have a pet peeve that has bothered me for many, many years. Well, that is an elevator with no nearby staircase. That you have to take the elevator. I just don't understand buildings that are built with no staircase nearby for whether it be exercise or because the elevator is out or anything else. Will we see that at Thomas?
Yes, and I'm glad because
we will see.
I was going in my brain, oh man, do we have stairs by those elevators? But we do.
They may not be very fancy. They may not be very accessible.
No, they're right there.
Elevator.
It's also because those are the places where traffic between the floors has to occur. Right. So it is important that it's a stair and an elevator. So here's a stair, there's the elevator. Here's a stair, there's the elevator. So there is a stair immediately adjacent to both elevators. So if you're walking you can decide, because you're pushing a science cart, that I need to use the elevator at this moment, or I'm not pushing something, I can go down these steps for the moment.
Okay.
And so that's there.
All right, there's nothing that aggravates me more than an elevator without a stairwell real close. Okay. Okay, I've got to pick up on something that Amy mentioned, and I guess I played fast pitch softball many years ago, but I played a lot more baseball many years ago. But the current orientation of the baseball field, and I guess the planned one for the softball field, is the major league. The south side is the first baseline, and the third baseline is on the east side or west side of the field. My question is, and I've played actually on fields oriented like what you're planning there, it means in the evening, in the early evening, sometimes in the late afternoon, the sun is right in a left-handed batter's face and facing we're talking high school, an 85+ mile per hour plus fastball when you got sun bothering you is not a safe situation. So my question is, and of course the major leagues generally, I think there's one exception, generally don't allow fields access that way because of the danger to the hitter. Has that been cleared with that orientation been cleared with our baseball?
We've showed the coaches, and to your point, we always let the batters face northeast or northwest, not southeast or southwest. So they'd be facing into a sun at any angle of the day. When the batter, the pitching line, is coming at you from the north, it means you're looking at mostly blue sky. Now, you're right. Is there a time in a late summer,
early summer, around June 22nd?
Yeah, exactly. And when the sun goes the furthest north that you're going to be hitting from that point, I don't know, but all baseball fields are, that face the batters facing northeast or northwest. And we have both of those here. And ideally, the softball is ideal in the batter's position. The baseball has that potential to have a left field sun. But again, it's not going to be behind the pitcher. It's going to be off to the batter's left.
But virtually every single baseball field in America, the batter is facing northeast, not northwest.
And I saw this, with all the baseball complexes that have, the pie-shaped, everything's facing all directions.
Right.
You're right. There's two of those fields that aren't very usable. These two are in the best two orientations.
Okay. All right. I couldn't not raise that.
No, it is
question.
very important.
This is a phrase I've never used in my life and never dreamed I would. Stacking for parent drop-off. I'm on the facilities committee, and at one time, very early, and I couldn't figure it out from looking at this, the area for this, I like that phrase, stacking for parent drop-off. The stacking areas, can get very backed up. In fact, it can, even if you've got a lane to pull out, one car can cause it to really back up. My question is, and what I suggested at least at one time, but again, I'm no expert on this, was that the long area be used for stacking. I didn't even know about that term, stacking for drop-off. And then, so you get out quick, rather than how it was once oriented, the way you came in was the one with the least amount of distance, and my concern was it backing up onto 161 because of, I didn't know the phrase, stacking problems. Are we going to have sufficient? I understand all the problems that Ms. Hudson raised about the turning in, and you're just going to get some backup. But my concern is that everybody can get into the premises, because they're all coming in a 10 or 15 minute. Parents are dropping off.
So I think on-site stacking is exceptional with this layout. I think the issue of the single entry point that Nikki raises is valid. We have to figure that out. What Pete said to me is if I thought because of a couple cellos and a couple tubas that this was going to end up being stacked up, I would have let them escape and go back to what we do today, which is we still have the opportunity to do a second relief stack. Google does this when getting to Riverfront Stadium or Paul Brown Stadium is backed up. Google starts telling you to go a different way. So Pete has in the back of his mind that the north side of the school is still potentially good for stacking because the north entrance of the school is still going to be there. And so today he has parents, turn here, they go up and they go all different ways to get back and go back out the same way they came. That gives him a little more stacking room, but he's never had this before. He's never had this promenade where we can drop people off. So I think in the mornings, you're going to have enough turnover that that's going to work. I think in the afternoons, depending on how early people get there and where they park and what they do, and if they park in the wrong place and they stop traffic, Pete's going to have some kind of escape plan for the worst case scenario. And I think we still have everything he has today, including the option, if he needs to, is to start scooting some people out to Evening Street just to relieve the pressure and then go back to making them turn around and go out on 161.
Okay, so stacking is not going to occur on the west and north end of the west parking lot.
Right. So parent stacking is the green line, ideally. It's they have the entire driveway to build to this turn point, and then they have this, several hundred, probably 400 feet worth of stacking space, and then they're going to escape, and they've got plenty of room there. Does Pete let him go up further north to overcome, or does he let him go this way toward the teacher parking lot to overcome that? I think we leave that ability for him. I would love to see if on a good day, and we could train the parents to do the right thing, we could make that promenade work all the time.
Okay. I'm no expert.
Somebody doesn't have now.
If it looped the other direction, you have enormous amount of stacking area.
Right. Can you go all the way to the
And there'd
top?
be a quick exit.
And you know what? If he told me that making the parents go clockwise instead of counterclockwise saved him, then I would say make it so.
Right. Okay. Thank you. You said you've removed, and I should have heard this before, removing the bathrooms near the competition gym and the Ox gym, where they are now. They really stick out, I understand. Are there going to be sufficient bathroom space for big spectator events at either the Ox gym or the competition gym? Because I have been to some fairly new high schools where you got to go a long ways or stand in line for a very long time and miss a quarter of basketball.
So the current bathrooms are between these three columns now, and they take up this red line, which means when you come in, you can't see down to the rotunda because the bathrooms would be in the way. Right now, you make this zigzag turn.
Right.
We're putting large group restrooms back here. So they're just a few feet away, huh? Equal number of fixtures. So we're not losing any fixtures from what you have today. Plus, if you go further to the student commons and maybe see it simulcast in the student commons on the wall, there's another set of large group restrooms that don't exist in Thomas at that location now today. So right away, your big events at the auditorium and the gymnasiums have two really large group restrooms to pull from. So I think again, we do no harm. Do we accomplish something that's a far more ambitious goal to have more restroom capacity? We certainly meet code. We certainly meet assembly requirements, and we have more than we have today. The same amount at the gym, and now all these new ones that are down here by the auditorium.
Okay, well, yeah, but for basketball games, or at least currently, you're locked off from going there unless there's something else going on.
Nothing further. No less access to bathrooms than we have today.
And will there be those
right in front? There's
unisex
individual
or
family
gender
restrooms.
neutral
Yes, so
bathrooms
they're available.
Okay. Thank you very much. And my last question: storage space. Actually, storage space. Both for outside. I was just thinking, certainly at Worthington Kilbourne, it's at a premium as to where to park. Machines used for anything from lining baseball fields and football fields. Like I said, we don't line them now because it's AstroTurf, but all kinds of outdoor. I just think storage space and inside too, is really valuable as buildings age.
I got calls Sunday night on my cell phone at home from teachers who were worried about storage space. So you were right on with that question. And we did very thoughtful. We have, over 1,000 square feet of loading dock space. You don't have any of that today at Thomas. In fact, you have a snow tractor, in the scene shop off the left of the stage. It's just because you don't have enough. And music stuff is stored in the hallway at music. We've made sure that all of the programming includes storage, and it doesn't come out of the square footage of the rehearsal room. It's in addition to the square footage of the rehearsal room. So we have lots and lots of indoor storage. I don't think we're having a huge impact on the outdoor storage requirements. We'll help a little. We even have some single restrooms accessible from the baseball fields inside the building in a vestibule that would lock so that you could have access to them on a weekend. And so the new field house has some storage, not a lot. So I worry that we're not necessarily addressing what your limitations of outside exterior storage are. We are definitely addressing your limitations on what interior storage is.
Actually, a good part of the field house is used for storage right now.
Yeah, I know. And so we still have that in kind, but we don't
Okay.
have a lot of additional.
All right, and I just want to repeat what I believe Nikki said, which is having had two kids go to Worthington Kilbourne, I hope we're doing everything we can to make sure that Thomas, this is the time to do it, has the best possible egress and ingress, and we don't get locked in like we are at Worthington Kilbourne. Okay, but thank you very much. I just hope that our new natatorium doesn't leak. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Dr. Bowers? Oh, go ahead.
I do have one more question that I forgot to ask. And I guess it's really related to both, but specifically at Worthington Kilbourne, we're adding the visitor side concessions and restrooms, but we don't have that at Thomas. So in terms of like both access and number of fixtures, is that equal among the two?
Yeah, so we have many more public restrooms in the Thomas Fieldhouse than we have currently near the stadium. There's a lower level and an upper level. They're not separated by visitors and home. That's a single building that's serving both sides.
Right.
So if you had a problem, maybe on the Kilbourne night, you could put visitors on below and home above if you had to separate people. But I don't see that. But we have a lot more outdoor restroom capacity at the Thomas Fieldhouse than anywhere on Thomas site has today.
Right. I realize that. I mean, it's doubling what we have now.
There's still a walk from the visitor side, but a walk to the top of the track, not a walk all the way around behind the home bleachers like you have to do at Kilbourne.
But between the two high schools, like, is it?
Oh,
do we have the same roughly
yeah. We're bringing
fixtures?
Thomas
Because
up
we're
to the
having
level.
Obviously two different facility or structures at Kilbourne, but only one at Thomas. I guess that's what my question is asking.
So the Thomas Fieldhouse has twice as many toilets as either of the individual buildings at Worthington, but putting them together, you're going to have pretty much of a wash because the stadium capacities and the code requirements are pretty much the same at both stadiums. The way you get to those restrooms is going to be different.
Didn't we apply for a variance for fixtures?
We always do. You always apply for a
At
variance
Thomas?
of about half.
Okay.
Because the potty parity law, it's called, in Ohio, requires a toilet for every 30 people. So if you had a 3,000 seat stadium, that's 100 toilets. If you had a 6,000 seat stadium, that's 200 toilets. And we don't want to build a field house with 200 toilets.
Right.
So.
Okay.
But we're providing
we're
the
just
same.
Right now, as we sit, we're
pretty close to same convenience.
very low in terms of numbers.
Correct.
I mean, you go to some of the new Dublin high school or the newest Dublin, I think, high school, and they have tons of restrooms at their stadium. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much for
Certainly.
a very, very important and very informative presentation. And keep up the good work and come in under budget.
We'll be back to you.
Under budget.
We'll be back to you with more projects under budget.
Okay, thank you. Now we are ready for the second reading of the naming rights policy. Our policy committee members are Kelly and Nikki, or Mr. Banks. I don't know who's gonna.
No, I'm glad to just share. This contains very minimal changes from the last one that you saw. Pursuant to our discussion at the last board meeting, we changed the language where it references that there will be a separate contract to indicate that there shall be a separate contract to make sure that it is clear that that's a necessity. And then otherwise, they were just grammatical changes and corrections that were made. Jennifer, you kindly sent some questions to us today. Do you want to share those and we can talk through those?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing and the biggest thing that I want to talk about is the termination of naming rights paragraph. It's confusing because it talks about the first rebuild and then the second rebuild, which may be 75 years from now or
Totally.
something. So I don't think that's what you intended.
Well, it actually is, and I'll tell you why, and then we can all step back and we can figure out what we think is the best thing to do. So our challenge right now is that we have a building, specifically Thomas, that's being completely demolished, and we have portions of that building that are currently dedicated. So there are naming rights that are tied to portions of that building. The auditorium is a great example. And we want to determine a way in which, as we move forward with the rebuild, that those naming rights are honored and carried forward in this next rebuild, with the understanding that that would be the extent of it. So in other words, this rebuild of Thomas would reflect in some way, shape, or form, yet to still be determined, those original naming rights and then likely another naming rights, let's say, associated with the auditorium. Now, what this does not reflect, and what we could choose, we could wordsmith this today, is that we only do that once. We only do that now upon, specifically related to Thomas or something, or the Thomas property. And that going forward, then all of those naming rights that we enter into, although there are probably some at Kilbourne, then it's for a set number of years that is articulated and agreed upon by all parties upon the initiation of the naming right, which is not what we have in place right now. So we're walking this, this dance, right? Walking this fine line in this dance of trying to set something up that's clear policy going forward, and that respects and honors those naming rights that are currently in place, and yet still provides the opportunity for naming rights in the future. I will tell you, upon rereading this particular section, I do think we could take out the very last sentence, because on its face, it seems to almost, I don't know, I think it just further muddies the water, and that can be removed and put into the contracts that we have in place every time we enter into a naming right, because all that's trying to reflect is that if we were to have the best wing at one of the schools, we couldn't, during the life of that term, of that naming right, we couldn't change it midterm. That's all that's trying to reflect. And so we could incorporate that instead into the contracts related to each individual naming right. But that's the fine line that we're trying to walk. And so when it says, I get it. It's confusing. Naming, and it's only related to naming rights and recognition. So it's just naming rights and recognition shall be modified upon demolition and rebuild of a property or facility, and shall be terminated upon discontinuation of a program. So we drew the line there. So we were only talking about facilities and property. So we're not talking about like what you do with a program that was named after someone and is no longer going on, which I don't think we have. And so that was a nice clean, let's set that aside. The next sentence, in the event of a demolition, or rebuild of a property or facility, the new naming of said property or facility shall continue to incorporate the prior naming right until such time as the next demolition and rebuild. And then in the event a property or facility is transferred, conveyed, closed, destructed, destroyed, and not rebuilt or renovated, then the naming right shall terminate. So we're only contemplating the situation really that we're facing right now at our schools, and mostly at Thomas, where we're going to be, and let's again use the auditorium as an example, we're going to be demolishing it and rebuilding it, and we're going to say this time, we're going to honor those naming rights and recognition to continue on, and we're going to incorporate that somehow into the naming rights of the new auditorium. Which hopefully is easier to follow than language.
And will the naming in memory of someone, will those, I mean, I know if there's money involved, there will be contracts. Will there be contracts or something written about?
There'll be contracts for all of
Okay,
these going
when it
forward.
happened and why, to kind of help keep track of it?
Absolutely. Every single naming right, whether it's in recognition or it's in consideration, requires
Would
a
have
contract.
a contract.
So going forward, we have a contract that memorializes the terms, and all parties are in agreement, which benefits everybody.
So since we started in on contracts, who will review this and make these decisions? Have we talked about like a community committee, alumni? What are the thoughts on?
Kelly, feel free to chime in. I mean, we talked about, we didn't put it in the policy, but that was the thought, that there would be a committee, a mixture of, as you articulated, that would review these before they came to the board for being voted on.
Okay, the task force committees have worked so well in this community to look at things and bring ideas forward that will be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in one of our first meetings, we talked with Pat from the Worthington Education Foundation, and we talked with Christy with the Worthington Alumni Association. So just bringing in those voices into the conversation too, as we talked about having a committee.
Okay.
Yeah, to bring it to the board as opposed to the board reviewing it individually.
Okay.
And we thought
sounds
those
good.
voices were really important as well, because everyone who may be approached with this opportunity may not have the financial means, and yet that shouldn't, we still want the involvement, right, from an alumni standpoint.
Yeah.
And so we want all of those parties at the table so that the plethora of ways in which someone can be involved from an alumni standpoint is in front of them and not just this opportunity.
Okay, and then my only other question I want to bring up is this whole First Amendment issue. If someone isn't chosen, has that come up? Have you heard that from other schools? Have our attorneys addressed that?
Our attorneys have addressed the policy and have reviewed the policy. We have not spoken specifically about First Amendment claims. I will tell you that when we first started going down this path, I did my research, and I think it's Duke Law School has a pretty extensive piece on this, dated from like 2007. I mean, it is absolutely a risk that every secondary education, every higher education navigates and has been able to navigate with legal counsel. And so we haven't specifically asked for an opinion around this, I think in large part because we see the fact that people can claim things, right? And it's a risk that's out there that others have been able to navigate in this space.
Through their
others.
attorneys, they've
Exactly.
been able to deal with it.
Exactly, but we did not specifically ask for an opinion on that issue. We just had them review the policy.
Okay. All right. I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for sending those beforehand so I could think through.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
I always try.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll save mine until we vote. Okay. All right, moving on now. We are ready for our superintendent's report.
Thank you. So I appreciate the opportunity to give a quick report as superintendent. As you know, our mission is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. And in Worthington, we have 4 vision statements. So we attempt in this report to kind of give an update in each one of those vision statements. So one of our vision statements is that we will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. So at our last Board of Education meeting, our special education department provided what I thought was an excellent presentation, really just working to explain the breadth and the depth of the programming that's offered in Worthington to over 1,700 students in our school district who've been identified under IDEA to need specialized services. So in Worthington, we recognize our responsibilities and we do endeavor to meet them. while also being cognizant of growing budget pressures in this area. So just as an update for next school year, we have committed to adding 10 additional teaching positions, including a school psychologist and 8 support staff positions. These are needed to meet caseloads and to support our students in the ways that we want to support our students. These positions represent a roughly $1.1 to $1.2 million increase in investment for next year into those specialized positions. And then that investment obviously continues in following years. Secondly, our second vision statement is that we will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. So each month, we film a segment for a video series that we call in Worthington, Miss Toya Reads. Miss Toya is our Director of DEI and is a way to celebrate the diversity that thrives in our school communities. Each month, the program provides a video read aloud that's shared with our students. And as you've seen, those Toya is obviously excellent on camera. This month, we featured stories celebrating women's history and inclusion. We hope these stories help create emotionally and socially safe environments for our elementary learners. Last week, I was able to publish a blog about one of those stories and an amazing Wilson Hill student named Langston. So if you didn't see that, we want you to see that. Our third vision statements, we will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. Today was day one of our State of the Schools Week 2023. Our State of the Schools is designed to provide a showcase of Worthington Schools programs and people of which we are extremely proud. This year's virtual event will consist of 5 days of online video releases. Our plan is to take a journey through Worthington schools where you'll see some of the programs, students, and staff that make this district a special place. Each morning this week at 8 a.m., you'll be able to watch the newest video when it premieres on Facebook and YouTube and on our Worthington Schools website and other social media platforms. Worthington parents will get an email, Worthington parents and staff will get an email every day highlighting the latest video. So we're excited about that. Hopefully you saw this morning's video. It was a Sutter Park video, so we're beginning with our youngest learners and transitioning tomorrow as an elementary school video. I would tell you more, but I really want you to watch it at 8 a.m. So, finally, our fourth vision statements, we will be responsible and transparent with our community's resources. Over the past several weeks, we've been engaged in the legal collective bargaining process with our Worthington Education Association, which is the employee union that represents all of our certified teachers. Guys, we know that in public education, nothing is more important than the teacher in the classroom, and we believe that Worthington teachers are absolutely the best of the best. This process has been collaborative, and we seek to create a win-win agreement for both teachers in the school district and for our community. As you know, as a service industry, over 80% of our budget is in people, purely salary and benefit of employees. So working to get a deal that is fair for both parties is of critical importance. Later this spring, we will transition to beginning this same process with the WESP, our Worthington Education Support Professionals, which is the employee union that represents all of our non-teaching and support staff. So that is the superintendent's update.
Thank you very much for an excellent update and report. Mr. Cusick, do you have a treasurer's report for us?
I do. Just one quick update on the ominous House Bill 1 that had its first hearing last week in Ways and Means Committee. The sponsor did acknowledge, perhaps realize, that House Bill 920 would apply, that is in the Constitution, and so any reduction in valuation would trigger an increase in tax rate to property owners. So that is some relief to us, although we wouldn't be held completely harmless because our newer levies that are collecting close to the maximum. So for example, our latest increment of 2 mills collects fully at 2 mills. So even if the valuation is reduced, it can't collect over those 2 mills. So that, long story short, in my original analysis, if 920 wouldn't apply, I said 10 to 12 million we would lose. If 920 applies, we would still likely lose 3 to 4 million. So not quite as much. And quite frankly, the sponsor did acknowledge that that wasn't their intent to pass that on to homeowners. So we'll see we'll see what happens here if this creates an amendment or a start from scratch or cancels this bill out. It's scheduled for another hearing this week. The only other two items, just more of a public announcement. We no longer, several years ago, we don't put our monthly financial reports to the board for approval, but we do put those on our website regularly. The February one was just presented to the board, so it's on our website. I encourage you to check that out. And lastly, I will remind you that March is Social Worker Month, so please thank your social workers, or if you see one of our mental health specialists, give them a hug, tell them they're doing a great job, and we can't thank them enough. That's all.
Thank you very much for that update on House Bill 1, and thank you for the reminder about, timely reminder of Social Worker Month. Thank you. All right, any board or committee reports from any board member? Kelly, or Jennifer, go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. We had a SPAC meeting last week. One of the things that keeps coming up is middle school, especially 7th grade softball, and the committee kind of postpones that because of our shortage of baseball and softball diamonds for this summer. It's something that they'll look at in the future, and we also were presented with information about middle school golf, which is now a club sport becoming a school sport. So I think our ADs are going to kind of look into that option, but nothing to come to the board at this point. Was there anything else, Amy, that I missed on that? And then I want to say that I went to the Black Joy movie, Akilah and the Bee, this Sunday, and it was like one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. It really showed how one teacher can make a difference in a child's life. So I highly recommend that movie. Collaborative project between the Alliance for Black Families, the library, the MAC, and they have one movie left this Sunday, which is Sister Act 2. So a little different than the school-related movie, but it's been a great collaboration, and it was really fun to be there. Appreciate the State of the Schools presentation this morning. It was fun to see that at 8. To everybody that worked on it, thank you so much for that. It was great, and I know we all look forward to tomorrow. And then key communicators meet towards the end of this month on the 23rd. I can be at the morning once again. I cannot be at the afternoon. Are you going to be there, Nikki? So
I'm fairly certain I will be, but I'll double check.
There will be one spot at 4 o'clock if another board member wants to show up.
Which day did you
It's on my
say?
calendar. Thursday the
23rd at
Yep.
4 o'clock. It's the internal key communicators. So Nikki will be there. We will be represented, but if someone else wants to go.
I'm
They can.
available and could attend if nobody else is able
Okay.
to. So we can determine that later too. but-
Yeah, why don't you plan on it?
Still a couple weeks away.
Yeah. For the time being, once you plan on it, unless something changes.
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Kelly?
I just have a couple of updates. I don't remember if I let you guys know that I was selected to be on OSBA's Black Caucus Committee. And so we had our first meeting on March 4th, which was the day of my brother's wedding, but thankful for Zoom that I was still able to join from Texas. And a lot was discussed in that meeting, a lot of orientation things. There are a couple of new members, but they also gave a legislative update. So Jennifer Hogue was there, just highlighting what's going on at the State House and encouraging school districts to reach out to their legislators. She talked about in-person testimony being the best course of action if we want to support or oppose anything that's going on at the State House, but that also to reach out to our legislators via phone or email, and just to keep the communication unique. So not a copy and paste, but just make sure that we're being very specific to what's happening here in Worthington and how any of this legislation that passes would affect our district specifically. She encouraged each district to kind of create a fact sheet. So like, how many free and reduced lunch do we have? How many EL students do we have in our district? The number of special education students, and just like transportation issues, or if any, that we're having in our district. So some just kind of basic overall of what's going on in our district specifically so that we can share with the legislators. So that was good. I'm excited to be part of that committee and see the work that's going forward. I also got to see, Amy and I got to go to the Warbots presentation that was given at Worthington Kilbourne, though the team is comprised of Thomas and Kilbourne students, and it was amazing. If you guys haven't, that was my first opportunity to really see up close and personal the work that that group is doing. And just the breakdown of the group, you think, okay, they're just building a robot together, but there's a business side of it, there's a design side of it, there's the engineering side piece to it. And so we had a lot of administrators join us for that, which was really a great opportunity to see. I was able to talk to a classmate that Jameson graduated with, and he goes to school here locally, college locally, and so he's able to come in and mentor other students that are in the program now, and just give help and guidance as they move forward. So their competitions are coming up, so be on the lookout for that. And then lastly, I got to attend the OSBA Spring Conference. Charlie and Amy were both recognized as let me get this right. It was great. Star Awards. So stands for, it doesn't tell me, but they're stars. And so they were both recognized at that event. Also, we got a legislative update there as well, and had a great speaker, Bruce Daniels, who has a number of car dealerships around the district, but also has an impact program that Trent says that 2 of our students are involved in. So it was good to hear from him when we're looking at opportunities for our students that aren't just the college path, but the career path as well. So that was a really good opportunity to listen to that. Tomorrow I have AAPL with Angie and her team. I'm looking forward to that. And on Thursday, my next student feedback session at Thomas with Charlie. So we'll see a lot of each other this week. And then so I'm looking forward to hearing from those students as well. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Kelly. The Warbots competition, you said there's some coming up. Do you know whether any of them are here in Worthington or at Kilbourne High School? Okay.
I don't. Cincinnati, I remember that being a location, but I don't remember the specific location.
I went to one at Worthington Kilbourne before the pandemic, and I'm a big sports fan, and it was exciting. They have referees in referee shirts and everything. So if there is one here, and I hope we can find out, if there is one, I would urge everyone to go. I knew nothing about what was happening, but it was still exciting. I felt like I was at a field hockey or lacrosse game, which I know nothing about. Okay, Amy.
Well, I feel like my report's been covered. I just thought it might be helpful to just reiterate Jennifer mentioned that we attended the SPAC committee, and just to reiterate for the community that the charge of the SPAC committee is with the responsibility to review and make recommendations to the superintendent regarding the supplemental programs available to pupils in the district. And so that's, as Jennifer referenced, we talked about middle school softball at length, and then also middle school golf. And then the only thing I would add to that meeting is that typically we go around and talk about, and especially from our athletic directors, talk about the successes of the previous season, and they share with us, and we get to share as well as what we have observed as observers. But that's also part of that meeting. So I just wanted to share that. And then, as Kelly said, we both attended the Warbots presentation, which was just incredibly impressive all the way around. They start out with a presentation, and we were told that they had not really rehearsed it a whole lot before they did. I mean, it was excellent. It was so good. And that was the business side of it that Kelly spoke about. And so just a really cool program that we have in our district. And then I attended the OSBA Spring Conference, and I think Kelly And I don't know what all the acronym stands for. Service training. I don't know what the A and the R. So
Achievement rec.
Names of those awards all the time, so.
I think it's student training achievement recognition. That's just off the top of my head.
Probably, yeah. So that's all I had. Thank you.
I'll be very quick. I haven't had any committee reports, and I will just thank the grace of the members of the policy committee because we were able to change our meeting, which allowed me to take a work trek that I needed to, but also to combine it with a discovery day for one of my kiddos. So I just want to echo again the value of those discovery days that we have available at Phoenix and also at Academy. And those are gyms, and if there are ways to slide them into other areas and allow students to connect with things that they're potentially interested in post-academics, it's a great opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy, too. Thank you, Nikki. I think everything I have has been covered, and I think I misspoke. It's service, I think, service training. Okay, we'll get there. So, okay. All right, but thank you very much. Moving now to actions recommended by the treasurer, routine business. Mr. Cusick.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the board approve items E2 and E3. E2 are the minutes from the 227 meeting, and E3 are routine general fund cross-object transfers. So items E2 and E3, please.
Okay, we're doing this as a consent agenda item, so any board member, if she wishes, we will separate them, but otherwise we will do them together. I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second that we approve the recommendation of the treasurer with respect to routine business. Any questions, comments? Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving now to actions recommended by the treasurer, new business. Mr. Cusick.
Yes, I'd like to recommend that the board approve a resolution accepting amended rates and amounts as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor for the 22-23 school year. As a reminder, this is an amendment of the tax year 22, collection year 23 tax rates.
May I have a motion approving the treasurer's recommendation?
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's recommendation. Any discussion, comments, anything additional you want to say, Mr. Cusick?
No.
Okay. Would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay. Are you going, did you do F2?
No.
Okay, didn't look so.
F2, I'd like to recommend that the board similarly approve a resolution accepting rates and amounts as determined by the Budget Commission, this time for the 23-24 school year, which will be tax year 23, collection year 24, as indicated in enclosure F2.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's recommendation with respect to the approval of rates and amounts for 2023-2024. Any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Motion passes. We move now to the personnel consent agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to recommend the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. Those are items G2 through G9 on your agenda. Action by the Board of Education and adoption of the consent agenda means that all items listed under the consent agenda are adopted by one single motion, unless a member of the board or the superintendent requests that any such items be removed from the consent agenda and voted upon separately. So again, the recommendation is items G2 through G9, please.
May I have a motion? Got a motion?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve items G2 through G9. Any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the Roll.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item H1. That's the acceptance of donations that are listed on your agenda. Item H1, please.
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and second to approve the superintendent's recommendation with respect to H1. Any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend the Board of Education approve item H2. Item H2 is asking the board to approve the schematic design and development phase submissions for Thomas Worthington High School, which will authorize construction documents as part of the ELP requirements. So that's the, try to speak out loud and all of a sudden the words you forget. It's part of the OFC project, right? So ELP keeps us earning that credit.
So moved.
Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the construction resolution. Any questions, comments? If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Okay, at this time, we take up actions recommended by the Board of Education, specifically the naming rights policy recommended by our policy committee. First, before we discuss it or going further, may I have a motion with respect to, lost it here, but with respect to the naming rights policy that we discussed with respect to the second reading earlier in the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion second to approve the policy, the naming rights policy that was discussed earlier in the meeting. Any questions, comments? Okay, as you know, I have some reservations about this. To a large degree, they are philosophical with respect to having serious reservations about the issues that can arise when public entities start raising private financial funds. But in all honesty, there's no doubt in my mind that the policy committee has worked very hard, drafted a document that I do not have any specific suggestions to approve. And in my opinion, it is a vast improvement over the status quo, which is no naming rights policy, which is something that's bothered me, particularly when we were doing naming rights, not necessarily for money, but just, those, what you call in the policy, naming in recognition rather than naming in consideration. And I think it's really important we have a policy. I have done a little bit of research, not nearly as exhaustive as the policy committee members have done, but there aren't many out there. I have a very hard time finding many, and the few that I did find, in my opinion, this is a superior document to the ones I found. So I feel uncomfortable voting on this for philosophical reasons, and also because I'm a lawyer used to working from and improving upon form documents, and there just aren't any good forms out there or precedents. So I will be voting yes with reservations, but I hope you understand where they're coming from. All right. Any other comments, questions? Okay. If not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll with respect to the motion to approve the naming policy, the naming rights policy?
Mrs. Hudson,
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd,
Yes.
Mr. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Best,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Okay. The second board recommendation is the motion, or is the decision whether to approve the memorandum of agreement with our WESP, which is an attachment to the board agenda. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to approve the MOU with the Worthington Education Support. What's the piece?
Professionals.
Professionals, that's right.
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion? Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the memorandum of agreement with the WESP. Any discussion, comments, questions, concerns? Okay, if not, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Are there any requests, questions, concerns from the board? Amy?
Well, I have two things. One, I just wanted to solve the STARS.
Okay.
mystery. So it stands for Service, Training, Aptitude, and Recognition.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
we'll add that to our acronym list. The other item I wanted to bring up, and I had talked to Dr. Bowers about this last week, I think, was in our previous meeting I had brought up about that the city of Worthington and Swim Inc. were starting to meet to have some discussions, and about us having somebody at the table to be part of that. And Dr. Bowers had shared with me that I believe Vicki Nesda, is that correct, is participating in that. And I just really feel like we should have a board member there since council has council members there. And I just wanted to see what everybody thought about that as that discussion, because obviously the pool is on school district land. So, and I don't even know when those meetings are, if they've been established or what that looks like, but.
I think it makes sense that one of us is there, especially since you're saying if city council
Members are there.
They
going
have
to be
three, they
there.
actually have 3 council members that are participating in it.
Yeah, then at least one of us should be there.
We should be part of that conversation.
I would like to ask Dr. Bowers for input if he has any
Yeah, absolutely.
on the issue of including 1 or 2 board members with joining Ms. Nesda in the attendance, I guess, at these meetings, because I don't think they're voting meetings of any kind.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you want to attend, it seems pretty clear that the board would like representation there. So.
Okay.
Can you find out maybe when they're gonna meet, what kind of schedule they have?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any information on that at this point. I mean, obviously Swimming came to the city of Worthington for an ask for the outdoor pool. It's been my perspective that, we've said this many times on the campaign trail, that we think the natatorium is a school facility. We know it is, it serves our students, but that school districts aren't in the business of outdoor pools. So therefore, Swim Inc. came, the city formed a committee to discuss with Swim Inc. So Amy is absolutely correct. It is, that pool sits on our property. But how they fund an outdoor pool, I didn't see as a school district question.
I can understand that.
Right, because I think some questions have come up. I mean, I know it sits on our property, but are they our pools because they sit on our property? It's all very confusing, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, so we've leased that land to Swim Inc., right? I mean, so the real confusing thing is the old natatorium, but that confusion goes away as we're building a new natatorium. But obviously, if that property does default, then we do own that property. And so there would be some cost, I would assume, right? Because, we'd have to make it parking lot ready or park green space ready or something, and that wouldn't be cost-free. But again, we've kind of maintained the position that the school district doesn't have we don't manage outdoor pools, and that's really kind of a grander community discussion for Swim Inc. to solve. We obviously went down that path of having discussions about a joint rec district. That really didn't progress, right? So we met for a couple years. What I had heard from the board at the time was that this board was open to those conversations and would be open to that kind of creation, but there just never got to be traction. Now, obviously, there was also a pandemic that happened in the middle of all that, right? So, I mean, there's some pieces there. Our task force then, as they went through the process, felt like the natatorium should be part of the high school build, right? So we went forward with that. We thought it was the best opportunity to secure the future of having a natatorium in Worthington. And so we did that. So we will own the natatorium. We have talked to Swim Inc. about a management agreement. We don't have anything that's finalized, but they're working on a management agreement, which would mean, we continue to own the pool, but we would contract with Swim Inc. to manage the pool property. We think that makes sense if that continues, because it makes sense to have one operator on that site, right? And there's some shared services with this one operator. However, if Swim Inc. no longer exists, and that's always a possibility, right? Like if they don't get this outdoor pool thing solved and don't come up with solutions, then Worthington Schools could go one path or the other. We could choose to operate the pool ourselves, Upper Arlington kind of takes that path, or we could choose another management company. So New Albany takes that path, right? So there's separate paths out there. We feel like those are options, but Swim Inc. makes the most sense right now in attempting to be a community partner and keep it on that site and those types of things, because we're hopeful that they solve that outdoor dilemma. So, I mean, we can reach out and ask them. I mean, I don't know if we can ask the city if they would like a board member to be present. I feel like it's their committee, though. Like, I don't know that I have the authority to say, we expect to have. I did reach out and say I'd like Vicki to serve on that after the last board meeting, so that at least, and my thinking there, though, to be honest with you guys, was different than, it wasn't so much participation as it was making sure that we knew what was being discussed, right? And that Vicki
I think could that's where I'm
attend
coming
that.
from. Knowing what's being discussed and the options that are out there, more so than having an equally strong voice as city council, but or the city of Worthington as a whole. But just being aware of what's going on and the conversations that are being had as people ask us, as we work on the natatorium. And there are going to come questions, what about the outdoor pool? And so it'll be good for us to know firsthand what those conversations are happening, and just a good connection with the city.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously my perspective is that this conversation's been ongoing now for 5 to 10 years, right? And so when people say to me, what's going on with the outdoor, I say Worthington Schools, like we run the natatorium, right? Like we feel like that's part of our school program. We hope that there can be a solution for the outdoor. But if that's not what the community deems, or that the city can deal with, or Swim Inc. can figure out, or those types of things, then that's good property, right? I mean, that's good land. It takes some complications away from the site. My hope's we never get there, right? The reason that we committed to build the natatorium where we did was because we believed that was in the best interest of the community and the indoor-outdoor, because it obviously would have made more financial sense for us to attach it to the building, because you gain some of those shared spaces. Our feeling was that this community is going to find a way to solve this outdoor, and if they do, then that indoor-outdoor connection makes a lot of sense. So that's why we've planned it the way we've planned it. I mean, we could obviously reach out and ask if they are comfortable with one of our board members attending.
So my suggestion for your response suggestions for an improvement is that we move forward in this way, that Dr. Bowers or his designee contact the city to see whether 1 or 2 board members may attend the meetings. And if they say no, I'm inclined to think that we ought not butt in where we're not wanted. But if they say yes, 1 or 2, that we find out when the next meeting is. And if I have that, I will circulate that to all 5 board members, and then I will appoint, seek interest in being on it and availability for that first meeting, and appoint 1 or 2, depending on what the city says, which normally the president does appoint committee members. So I would appoint 1 or 2 based upon availability for that first meeting and interest, and then receive feedback from the 1 or 2 board members that attend, whether it makes sense for the same people to, for the continuity, always attend, or for it to rotate, depending on the nature of the meetings and the recommendation of the 1 or 2 board members that attend the first meeting. Does that sound like a feasible
Yes.
way to move forward? Okay. All right. Thanks for raising the issue,
Thank you.
Amy. Nikki?
Nothing on my end. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yeah, I am not going to be at the next meeting. So like some of our community members that are frustrated with the no live streaming of community comments, I'm going to end up being frustrated when I turn it on. Is there any way to see, listen? I mean, my whole tenure on the board, we've been able to listen or see the entire board meeting.
We don't record this.
I'm glad to share an update with you afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. That would
Absolutely.
be very nice. I appreciate it. If you could just maybe
Yeah, I'll just summarize.
email, summarize. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Any other?
That's it for me.
Okay. Kelly?
Anything?
And I think I've talked enough this meeting. I have nothing. There's a lot I could say, but I see no need for for you all to endure it. I'll go home and see my wife. She'll get to hear it. Okay. All right. If there are no other requests, questions, concerns from the board, the calendar, again, I want to emphasize, I hope I get it right this time because I didn't the last meeting, but thankfully Dr. Bowers corrected me before the meeting was over. Our next board meeting will start at 7:30.
Next
Okay.
2 board meetings.
Actually, the next 3 will start at 7:30. The next 3 will start at 7:30, and we will have a presentation that I'm really looking forward to, and that is an EL update, our English learners, and that will be 2 weeks from today at 7:30. Then the following week, 2 weeks later, on April 10th, we will have another 7:30 meeting here, our regular board meeting. Okay, at this time, we need to enter into executive session for the purposes of negotiations or bargaining, as well as for the purpose of discussing employment, dismissal, appointment, et cetera, of a public employee. May I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to enter into executive session, a non-debatable motion. So, Mr. Cusick, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Best?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Lloyd?
Yes.
Motion passes, so we will now be entering into executive session. Then we'll come out of executive session and to adjourn. There will be no further business or discussion after the conclusion of the executive session. If we come out, we'll come out just for the purpose of adjourning. So no business will be conducted later today. Thank you very much.